From across the field of battle, Courtney finally managed to break free from her corner. She sent a bout of fire towards the revenant crowd, bone knife in hand. The creatures fell away, flailing to put out the flames.
Courtney!
Walter called out. He took a moment to place a large caliber bullet in the chest of another revenant headed towards his friend. The monster fell with a thud.
You okay?
The dragon mage moved to cover Walter's back and the two brandished their weapons.
Anwen's in trouble,
She told the man as they slowly circled.
I heard her calling out to me for help.
Walter fired another round, reaching for a new clip as the casing flew.
I saw Tyler go down.
He confessed.
Maybe she's over there.
He indicated the direction with a shrug of his shoulder, aiming his sights on another target. His sniper training was paying off. More revenants converged on them as they tried to change locations. Courtney used her mage skills to shatter the spent shell casings Walter left behind. The fragments ran out like angry hornets from a nest. Several of the monsters yelped in pain. They were then silenced as Walter put a bullet in their chests.
I hate zombies!
Courtney yelled as she manipulated the rocky terrain beneath them. These revenants were no better than mindless beings. If they'd been the full-blooded revenants, they probably wouldn't have gone down quite so easily. She knew the true ones had to be still out there somewhere, waiting for their turn. The ground opened up to swallow their foes. Another mage came to their assistance, freezing more creatures into stone. The second mage blew the statues to dust. Fragments of stone shot through the air as Walter and Courtney ducked.
Cover up!
Walter shouted as he shielded Courtney from the debris.
You've got to help Tyler in the cave.
The two mages nodded and attacked, full out as Walter pulled Courtney along. More stone fragments flew as they passed another group of mages harassing a revenant. The veteran didn't so much as pause as they moved past the engagement. The ground rumbled as the dragon released a massive boulder overhead. The misshapen rocks scattered everything in its path as it rolled through the ruins. The two friends had to duck and roll to avoid being smashed.
Are you okay?
Walter yelled over the din once it was clear. Courtney nodded at Walter's inquiry. Other than a few cuts and bruises, she was unharmed. But she didn't dwell on it as they picked themselves up and continued on. After dodging around several more points of combat, Walter spotted a dull silver heap. It had to be Tyler in dragon form. He rushed towards the scaled mass, Courtney right behind him. It took a moment to realize Anwen was by his side. The shadows almost swallowed her from view.
Anwen!
Courtney breathed as she dropped down next to her friend. She looked for any mortal injuries but couldn't see any on either Anwen or the dragon. But Tyler's scales seemed more dull than usual, and that worried her. With an effort, Anwen opened her eyes.
Courtney,
She breathed.
you came.
A shadow of pain crossed over her face, causing her to go white under the dirt. She coughed weakly from the dust. Walter moved to her side, trying to examine both his friends for any outward signs of distress.
What's wrong with Tyler?
He finally asked, noting the uneven edge where Anwen had persuaded his scales to regrow. Anwen rolled over onto her back with an effort. The crystal sword clanged against the stone as she moved.
We're dying,
She said, one hand reaching out to the dragon.
a revenant poisoned him, and he can't stop it.
Courtney's face paled under the grime.
I don't think there's a cure for that.
She whispered, one hand over her mouth. She racked her brain for anything that might help, but couldn't think of anything. She never heard of anyone surviving revenant poisoning, except for Anwen, and it had taken half a dragon's soul to do it.
There's one way.
Anwen panted as she reached for the sword once more. With a quickly uttered word, the blade shrank down in size. It now resembled the small key she usually wore around her neck. The chain dangled from her hand as she held it.
But we have to go inside the mountain, to the Great Crystal.
The blonde shook her head.
Aren't we trying to keep the revenants from getting in there? We can't open the gates. You know that. It's why they asked you to seal them in the first place. Besides, you know Callum won't let you pass.
Walter tried to follow what was going on. Even with the others fighting around them, keeping the revenants distracted, he felt on guard. It was possible they'd be left alone, but he wasn't willing to take that chance.
Open the gates? You sure that's wise?
It's the only way.
Anwen nodded. It was something her mother had shown her when she'd closed Tyler's side. The great crystal sustained all life, which was why the revenants wanted it so much. And if she could get Tyler there was a chance they could save him. Courtney shook her head.
There's no way either of us can carry Tyler up there in his current form. Not even if all three of us tried together. and you're in no condition to carry anything.
She glanced pointedly at Anwen. Trying to sit up, Anwen nodded.
But I can try to persuade him his form to change. He's taken an immortal appearance so often, I'm sure I can persuade him to do it again.
The mage couldn't help but gasp.
Are you sure? I mean, the only forced changing of living flesh I've heard of results in the creation of a fallen. What if he rejects it? What then?
Seeing one of the lesser revenants heading their way, Walter put a bullet through its chest.
Whatever you plan on doing, you better get to it.
He warned.
We can't stay here forever.
Either way, we're both going to die.
Anwen reminded.
If there's any hope, I have to try. Help me up. I need to be near his head.
With the help of her two friends, Anwen stumbled towards Tyler's triangular skull. She settled next to his jutting jaw, his teeth gritting against the pain. Anwen clenched her fist. Bending over Tyler's head, she caressed his cheek ridge with one finger. The razor edge of the scale split the skin of her fingertip and 3 drops of blood fell onto the dragon's side. Moving slowly, she pressed her forehead against his.
Stay with me,
She whispered. Walter and Courtney had to shield their eyes as a bright glow spread from the ring on Anwen's closed fist. The light intensified until it engulfed the woman and the dragon in its embrace. As the glow began to fade, Courtney noticed Tyler's body shrank with it. It didn't take long before the form she remembered all too well lay on the ground in front of them. His head lay cradled in Anwen's arms. Tyler gasped. His skin looked almost gray, except for around the area where Anwen had fused the flesh. That burned an ugly reddish black through his ruined clothes. He lay with his eyes closed, hands clenching and unclenching as Walter moved to examine him. Anwen leaned back and would have gone down had it not been for Courtney.
You don't look so good.
Her friend commented as she supported her from behind.
Don't like it.
Walter announced.
There's nothing I can do about it. Best I can do is help you out with whatever plan you got.
He looked at Anwen, who was sweating profusely.
You look to be in the same condition.
soul sharing.
Anwen gasped through clenched teeth, trying to not puke.
He said it would be like this. Remember? Easy dies. I died too. Remember? It works both ways. That's why we have to get inside the mountain. That way, at least one of us can...
Walter nodded. He moved to lift Tyler, hefting him in a fireman's carry position.
Courtney, if you can support Anwen, we can make our way to the gate. I just hope Callum lets us pass.
With a nod, Courtney helped Anwen to her feet. She was well aware of Callum's attitude towards mortals, even if it had changed a bit as of late. She could only hope he'd let them through, though part of her doubted it. It took some doing, but they finally managed to snake their way past most of the fighting. They had to take a break near the old main square of the ruined city. The original buildings had not yet been completely rebuilt, and somewhere ahead, Callum guarded the pathway to the gates of eternity. To hide the gates more effectively, Callum had taken on his human form. That way, any revenants were less likely to take a second glance due to the bulk of a dragon showing through the mist. It helped that he was using his abilities to create an illusion. It not only masked the area from above, but the path from the ground as well. If Anwen hadn't known it was there, she wouldn't have looked twice.
Almost there.
Courtney tried to assure. She panted with each step. Even though Anwen was trying to help, she didn't have much strength left, and it was taking a toll on the other girl.
Man, what I wouldn't give for a shot of dragon mead right about now.
Anwen clutched the key with one hand.
I can make it from here.
She said. She tried to stand on her own, but swayed. If Callum was going to blast them for trying to reach the gate, she'd rather her friends not be in the line of fire. Walter shook his head.
No good.
He disagreed.
You know we're still going. There's no way you can do it in your condition.
He suspected she was using up more than a fair share of energy just trying to keep Tyler alive. Unfortunately, that also hindered her ability to move on her own.
So don't even bother trying to stop us.
Courtney added as she steadied her friend. Her thoughts ran on the same vein. Too tired to argue, Anwen only nodded. Chances were good neither would make it, but their chances were better with the help offered.
Let's go.
She agreed with Courtney's sentiments about the dragon mead. It would be helpful. They continued forward, passing through the illusionary boundary like ghosts. A chill fell over them all once they passed through the visual barrier. Thick mist rolled down the path to meet them. The fog made it hard to see, even though the path was smooth.
It's cold.
Anwen shivered. Courtney continued to push forward, one arm around her friend's shoulders.
Revenants can't stand the cold.
She reminded. A dark mass appeared ahead of them. It grew more solid the closer they came to it.
Turn back, unless you seek death.
Callum's cold voice echoed down to them.
For you will only find death here.
Anwen gasped in pain. It was becoming harder to shunt it aside as it echoed through her body.
I'm already dying.
She replied.
And so is them. Unless you let us pass.
She hadn't meant to use his draconic name, but it slipped out unbidden. Callum strode forward. The mist dispersed around him as he moved, though it still filled the area around him. It still favored his mortal form, one similar in appearance to Tyler's. Only his expression was far from friendly as he wielded an elongated bone knife.
Keykeeper Kada, you should not be here. Should a revenant find you, our plans will be ruined.
Walter took a step forward.
Did you hear her? She's dying.
He hefted Tyler as the Dragon Lord threatened to slip from his shoulders.
And so is your brother.
The older dragon narrowed his eyes as he took in the sight of his injured kin.
I cannot let you pass,
He finally said.
You know why. Once the gates are open, the revenants will swarm. And if the keykeeper goes inside, the gate cannot be resealed.
Anwen closed her eyes as moisture leaked from the corners.
Is it all in vain? All this effort?
She couldn't help but feel a sense of defeat. She should have known it wouldn't work.
Can't you do something about it?
Walter demanded.
Can't you take the key?
Anwen slid to the ground.
I can't accept this. I won't let Tyler die. I don't care what happens to me. Just help him. Please, Callum.
The Dragon Lord remained impassive.
I cannot take possession of the key. Only one of mortal descent may do so.
Courtney bit her lip. Were they really going to fail? After everything they'd been through? Were Tyler and Anwen really just going to die?
It's not fair.
She whispered. Then a thought struck her and she looked up with hopeful eyes.
Wait, you said mortal?
Callum nodded.
Only those of mortal blood are allowed to possess the keys of Tarragon. And whoever possesses the master key must remain behind to seal the mountain. It was how it was designed.
Me.
Courtney said as she took a step forward.
It has to be me.
She looked at Anwen, who had lifted her head.
Give me the key and I will seal the mountain behind you. It can't be Walter. You need him to carry Tyler. You know it has to be me.
Anwen couldn't help but feel shocked at her offer. But her friend was right.
You do that for me.
The mage nodded.
I'll never be more than a low-level mage. Even if many consider me your second in command. I've accepted that. But this will allow you to do whatever it is you need to do to save Tyler.
The Kada looked up at Callum, wondering if he would allow it. She clenched the key in her hand, waiting to hear the Dragon Lord's decision. Callum looked from Anwen to Courtney to Walter and his brother. Seeing the determination in their eyes, he closed his with a sigh.
Very well. If you do this, I will allow the other three to pass.
Anwen tried to stand, but Courtney knelt so she didn't have to. She reached out the hand holding the key and the other mage clasped it with her own.
I am Anwen Porter,
The girl said.
Master Keykeeper, with the charge to guard it and all the gates of Tarragon. Let it pass down through your generations and never fall into the wrong hands.
He looked into Anwen's eyes, feeling the weight of responsibility settle over her.
I am Courtney Willis. I accept the title of Master Keykeeper and the guardianship of the Master Key, as well as all the gates of Tarragon.
The blue crystal lit up as Courtney finished speaking. Its light bathed them both in blue. Callum nodded in approval.
Go, now,
He admonished.
before your presence is noticed.
Taking the key, Courtney moved past Callum until she faced the blank wall of stone that hid the gate. She held the key aloft as if presenting it to the mountain.
I am Courtney Willis, Master Keykeeper, and I command you to open.
She thrust the crystal end of the key into the wall. A crack Cracks formed the outline of the doors as a massive wind blew outward from the doorway. It blew the protective mist away. Anwen used the mountain's wall to stand once the wind had passed. She swayed slightly as she pushed to stand unaided. With the responsibility of the key gone, she felt somehow lighter. Despite that, her body felt as old as the mountain.
We have to hurry.
She said and moved towards the open gate. Walter took longer to follow, as he'd had to brace himself against the wind. But he'd remained upright. Readjusting Tyler's position over his shoulders, he gave a nod to Courtney and Callum as he moved by them. The moment they'd passed through the gate, Courtney thrust the doors closed and resealed them. She placed the key's chain around her neck.
I hope they make it in time.
She whispered.
Come.
Callum called out to her.
Now that the gates have opened once more, the revenants will swarm. You must hide, or they will find you. I will make sure this does not happen.
He reached out one hand, which she took with a nod, hoping he knew what he was doing.